show starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Greetings and welcome. We're back. We're actually back. We navigated through some of our technological issues. It was something pretty minor, and we're grateful. Again, a special shout out to none other than visionary Queen Angela for just making my return to the kings and queens of the airwaves really powerful. This is Queen Mother, Dr. ChenziRa. My broadcast really focuses on Speaks, building a new legacy, and really bringing some different highlights of not just news, but just positive, uplifting things in the midst of chaos that is impacting all of us. So I'd like to always start the way that we have been accustomed to starting. Just take a really deep breath and hold it for a count. Today is really powerful because there's a lot of energy in our universe. Let that breath out. This is a great time for persons to spend quality engagement with family, loved ones, friends, those that authentically support and house some energetic love vibes for how you live, how you pray, how you worship, how you fellowship, how you are engaged in recreation, how you breathe, how you dance, how you sing, how you write. And on the writing part, a special shout out to our visionary Sister Queen Angela for just making an opportunity for our poets in the Poets Unite anthology for 2026, Volume 1, be featured on Times Square billboard in Nueva York, in New York. So April 1st might have been April Fool's to the rest of the world, but it was a wonderful opportunity to really feature several of the poets that are published in the Aspiring Authors magazine experience. And I just wanted to highlight that. And then there are persons from that collection of writers, published authors that have books forthcoming. And so just keep an eye on what is taking place to really offer that support. I'm always saying to persons, we have a lot of resources. We have a lot of persons with skills, talents, and expertise that many times goes unnoticed, underfunded, not just unfunded. It's not that we don't have any resource, but it's underfunded. And so, within all of the persons that are within earshot of this particular message, I'm encouraging you, and I'm saying it from a space in the middle of the Caribbean Sea at a time that there's a lot happening in the earth plane. And I'm encouraging persons to really be part of the solution, be part of the energy that really allows for us to work together, to share experiences together, to highlight a variety. It's just powerful. This is a great time. I think too that I'd like to send a special shout out to the brothers and sisters who have observed various significant international days. There's been a lot of activity happening through the United Nations, and I say this from a space of the recent announcements of the various adoptions on March 25th. And I think that for those persons that may not be as aware, that March 25th annually through a General Assembly resolution in previous years is marked as the International Day of Remembrance of the Victims of Slavery and the Transatlantic Slave Trade. A moment of silence. And here we are, a week and one day later, And there were several significant happenings on that particular day, at least this year. This was a time where the UN General Assembly convened, they honored victims, they engaged with having speakers from a wide range of spaces. Of course, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. There was also General Assembly member Anna Annalena Baerbock. There were others. There was the significant presentation by the Honorable President of the Republic of Ghana, John Mahama, where there was a significant reading of the proclamation. At this point, it's just it's deeper than that in regard to the transatlantic slave trade being the greatest crime against humanity, and especially because of its influence on the enslaved, the slavers, everyone above, below, and on all sides. It impacted the entire global community, and it definitely shifted industry and development and the essence of humanity and the survivability and resilience thereof. So there's more to share on that. There's other persons that I know will speak to that in forthcoming pieces. I think it's important to know that there was a reparations debate and discussion in regard to repairing the damages done to all impacted by the enslavement, what some persons refer to in this capacity, the transatlantic slave trade. You'll hear persons use more empowering decolonialized terms and referencing it as the enslavement trade, and even elevating to what really took place that we know is trafficking, which just brings the essence of the dehumanizing elements and the degrading elements, the sadistic elements, the masochistic elements, and the psychological damages that are still being worked through the layer of trauma, right, from that whole experience. And this is also a time where there was a significant layer of discussion around other aspects of human rights that are being violated and being publicly and blatantly violated around the globe. The other part that was part of that deep dive, if you would like to look at that, is to highlight that this particular resolution, which when voted upon, there was 123 nations that voted in favor of this resolution, hence seeing the enslavement trafficking of African people and all that it impacted as the gravest crime against humanity. And there were three nations that said no. However, there were more than 50 nations that abstained. And that brings another layer of conversation on how we begin to highlight the pieces. So I want to just share this particular segment. Today we come together in solemn solidarity to affirm truth and pursue a route to healing and reparative justice. And this is coming from the presentation so eloquently delivered by Ghana's President John, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama. And again, this is with him presenting this before there was a vote on behalf of the 54 member African group, which is the largest regional bloc in the UN. Let's just be very clear. So there was conversations on, quote, the importance of looking at the force nature of generations upon generations of exploitation. I think it's important that these were some of the things that were highlighted, that this trafficking, quote, of enslaved Africans and racialized chattel enslavement of Africans as the gravest crime against humanity by reason of the definitive break in world history, scale, duration, systemic nature, brutality, and enduring consequences that continue to structure the lives of all people through racialized regimes of labor, property, and capital, unquote. I think it's important to just, and I encourage persons, please look at news.un.org, and you can begin to see some of the material that I'm even sharing from, because it's many times when people talk about the slave trade, it becomes, quote, unacknowledged, unspoken, and unaddressed, unquote. I think it's important that persons remember some of these things, because when we speak of the energy that's consuming the earth right now, peace, tranquility, balance, divine righteousness, harmony, propriety, just full harmony are difficult, but they're essential for the human family, human society, civilization to thrive. And many times persons will stay like in their bubble. And as long as it doesn't affect me, I don't need to speak on it. But it's affecting all of us in different degrees. I think it's also important. There's a quote on the UN site by Esther Phillips, first poet laureate of Barbados. And the quote reads as follows: "There are spirits of the victims of slavery present in this room at this moment, and they are listening for one word only: justice," unquote. Those are the types of energies that are surrounding that. And as I said earlier, we're going to speak to some of this. We know that there's a large conversation regarding, how we begin to have these conversations so that things are shared in a form that allows for us to move forward and not stay grounded and hung up on the hatred level, or on the discord level, or on the divisive space. So, a lot of times when these different resolutions, proclamations, and sharings are offered and provided, it's very interesting to see that it also breeds a very open ended types of conversation when we talk about what is happening in the United Nations, that even when they support a resolution as powerful as this one, there's still questions on what are the next steps. And there's still a request to do more studies and feasibility reports and research and secure more data for something that is very clear, commanding of resolution, reconciliation, reparatory justice, and outright reparations most immediately. And not the reparations that persons may focus on just a money or a paper money exchange, but on equity and authentic equality in our industries, in the mining of our resources, in the technology and the access to technology in space, inside the core of the earth, surrounding the earth, in the water, into perpetuity. Education that is equitable, and it is in the form that is most advantageous for our human family to authentically thrive. For agriculture, because all of this will make absolutely no significant mark in our ability to thrive if we do not have food and we do not address food sovereignty, food security, agritourism that is pro human, agribusiness that is pro human, and of course, animals, minerals, etc. Right? This is a time where we should be looking at our marine spaces as well as our terrestrial spaces, as well as our space above and surrounding us, to make sure that we are addressing, whether it's whichever term works for you, is what I'll encourage. If you don't believe that the global community is warming, touch the fire again. What is transpiring with climate change, and what are some of the environmental transitions that each and every one of us need to be engaged in, to make sure that it's like a catchy song phrase, but it's a serious matter. Stay alive by keeping it below 1.5, right? Persons hear this in terms of the temperature of the earth and that which surrounds us. Clean water. So now it starts sounding like I'm talking about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I always express to persons that that's something that I noticed that even some of our young minds, they didn't know that there was an actual initiative moving this agenda into 2030, which is quite close. As quiet as it's kept, 2030 is right there. It's coming right in these times. It's important that persons are aware of the 17 goals that make up the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs specific to sustainable development. And just for the purposes of our podcast tonight, and just being able to share at a time where persons are really in a deep space of reflection around the globe, around the energy of this moon, this full moon that a couple days ago was coming in with that quote pink moon and that wonderful astronomical support system that persons forget. And I'm not speaking of astrology, I'm not talking about the human interpretation of what's happening with the planets. I'm speaking of the scientific aspect of what is taking place and how our bodies that are made up of more than 70% of water actually are engaged in, are actually experiencing, are actually moving towards. I think it's important that we bring some of this conversation into fruition around this particular time. So, whether persons are honoring and observing Pesach, Passover, whether persons are on the eve of what many refer here in the Caribbean, it's Holy Thursday, there'll be Good Friday, Easter Saturday, Easter Sunday, and nothing is complete until after Easter Monday. And here on the Isle of St. Croix, not all, but it's a Easter tradition amongst the families that practice one of the most significant holy times in the Christian faith, yeah? Around this time of the year. And families go and they camp and they stay by the sea. And yes, they recreate together. Some people make it a tad more modern, but most of the intention is to be away from the mundane nature of regular life and to just really be in a space of spiritual upliftment. For some, they fast. Some persons, various ministries may use it as a time for heightening baptisms. Some persons will equate it to what you see in the African American community in the 48 contiguous US as a ring shout. And persons will fellowship and sing songs and praise and pray together around this time of the year. It's not all, and everybody has their different way of engaging. This is also a time amongst the Rastafari faith and movement. And let me be very quick. The Rastafari traditions in its more ancestral, ancient way is a time where there's honor for the earth strong liberation, birthing time of Her Imperial Majesty, Empress Menen Asfa, the wife, consort of His Imperial Majesty, Emperor Haile Selassie I of Ethiopia. So there's a lot of different, and then there's other observances in other ethnic spaces, other communities. So I just am encouraging persons to just be aware of, like, if you're feeling things. This is also a time of what people refer to as the ascension, also the time of betrayal, also the time of death of the illuminated Keras, Christed one, right? And it's also a time of resurrection. So it's really important that we at least recognize not everybody's Christian, not everybody's Jewish, or is practicing some form of Judaism. Not everyone really understood a couple weeks back the Eid, or the closing, I shouldn't say closing, but the culmination of Ramadan amongst the Muslims around the world, or those that were in Hajj doing that pilgrimage to their holy spaces in Mecca. I just think it's important that we remember that there's a lot of things that are happening, and this is all happening at the same time that there's some chaos. But we'll talk about the chaos later. For the purposes of this gathering just now amongst us, and especially since this is my return after having some technical issues, I like to encourage persons to go to the SDGs. S is in sustainable, D is in development, G is in goals, S is in social. So sdgs.un.org, and that'll take you to the website that specifically shares details on the 17 sustainable development goals. And I'll just go through them briefly. I'm not going to read all of the particular information, because you'll be able to see what are some of their targets, what are some of the events that have already taken place globally, what are some publications. Most of their publications are available for free. And these are things that are good tools to use to inform, persuade, have a call to action, and engage your respective community, because each one teach one as each one heals one. And if all of us spend time, if we all take a little bit of time, let's just say we took 17 days, and in each of our conversations at work, at school, in our places of worship, in our places of recreation, in our social circles, we just talked about some of these. Over the course of time, more people will be at least aware that there are these sustainable development goals that are intended to really shift and improve the quality of life, so that our human civilization, our families, our societies, our communities, our nations can actually thrive as well as survive in the midst of many things changing in our environment. The first one is goal one is end poverty in all its forms everywhere. So essentially, no poverty. Goal two is zero hunger. End hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. Goal three, good health and well being. Ensure healthy lives and promote well being for all at all ages. Goal four, quality education. Ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all. Goal five, gender equality. Achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. Goal six, clean water and sanitation. Ensure availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for all. Goal seven, affordable and clean energy. I want to pause on that one to bring this home for where I sit in an island community in the Caribbean under this sovereign relation, federal relation with the United States of America, the Virgin Islands of the United States. Now, while I sit on the Isle of St. Croix, and our interruptions with electricity and hence water, while we're surrounded by the Caribbean Sea, has been minimal compared to our brothers and sisters, our families, our businesses, our schools on our sister islands of St. Thomas, and St. John. In some instances over the last few weeks, St. John, while there is no hurricane, there are no earthquakes, no storms at this time. Give thanks. But persons are without power for more than 18 hours at a time. So that's creating a lot of imbalance. And especially during this time of holy engagement, it's just putting a lot of stressors on people, especially our elders, and especially our homebound elders, and especially those that have special needs that are not fully aware of what is taking place, except that the power goes off, the water doesn't run, the pump doesn't happen, all the food that you purchase is spoiling because there's no refrigeration, no power for refrigeration. Pause. So keep us in prayer so that something will give, because we do have a entity, the Water and Power Authority, that obviously needs global support. I'm putting that out there. Who's vexed, get over it. Sustainable Development Goal 7, affordable and clean energy. Ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. Goal 8, decent work and economic growth. Promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Goal 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Build resilient infrastructure, promote inclusive and sustainable industrialization, and foster innovation. Goal 10, reduce inequalities. Reduce inequalities within and among countries. Goal 11, sustainable cities and communities. Make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. Goal 12, responsible consumption and production. Ensure sustainable consumption and production patterns. Goal 13, climate action. Take urgent action to combat climate change and its impacts. Goal 14, life below water. Conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development. Goal 15, life on land. Protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation and halt biodiversity loss. Goal 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. Promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development. Provide access to justice for all and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Goal 17, partnerships for the goals. Strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. Again, these are the sustainable development goals. You can easily go to sdgs.un.org and review and see them. I'm giving just an overview because I can imagine if it was like you will win $10 million if you can list all 17 sustainable development goals, I would not win the money. I would be able to give you an idea of what they are because I can remember like several of them. We always talk about no poverty. We always speak about clean water. We always speak about gender equity. And there's several others. We always talk about, not always, we should, quality education. So if we can just good health and well-being, these are things that we're saying all the time. We just don't have them in this particular order. So here's an opportunity. Persons can get downloads of flyers, of guidelines, of workshops that they can do, PowerPoints, short videos, long videos, informative videos, persuasive videos that help to establish our quote 2030 agenda for sustainable development. And we're talking about the entire globe. And this was adopted since 2015. And here we are in 2026. And many of us are still not that informed in regard to, and I want to quote, this provides a shared blueprint for peace and prosperity for people and the planet now and into the future. And the whole idea is how you can reduce inequities. How do you spur economic growth? And there's Earth summits that have been conducted. This is tied to the Millennial Development Goals to reduce extreme poverty. And mind you, this was done so that people from 2000 were saying that in 15 years they were going to reduce extreme poverty. So there's more work to be done. And then this Sustainable Development Goals framework was established in 2015. And here we are 11 years later, and there's more work to be done. So I share those things just as context for some of the other areas that I would like to highlight tonight. And there's been a number of brothers and sisters that are also involved. I think it's important to know that there are still needs. Let me be more specific. There's still support and resources that are essential for our brothers and sisters that have shown the type of resilience post hurricanes of 2025 in spaces like Jamaica, right? And other parts of the Caribbean spaces. It's very important that we keep our eyes very close on the support that is was withheld but is now getting into our neighboring isles of Cuba, right? It's important that we're seeing efforts. People tend to talk about the news only like one thing at a time, but we have to continue to send energy and support and prayers in action to Haiti, right? There are things that are happening in Colombia, in Venezuela, in Guyana, in Suriname, in French Guiana, and all through Central and South America. We need to make sure that we keep our eyes on the course. Our brothers and sisters in the 48 contiguous US and Hawaii and Alaska and the territories that are still operated as colonial entities under the sovereignty of the US. We need to be mindful of what is taking place, not just in the distractions and extremisms, but what are the things that we could do to make sure that we have clean water, that we have safety in our shelter, that we are able to have some degree of transport to get to where we have to get our food, to where we have to work, to where we have to engage in worship, and much more. Making sure that we have peace. How do we do that? And where are we willing? What are we willing to do together? So I say that part on the what are we willing to do this together through a lens of, there's a number of organizations that are doing humanitarian work to support. People are bringing oil, gas, diesel, etc. People are bringing solar resources. How do we handle our deficiencies in energy around the globe? And why is it that some nations have all the wealth and other nations are still impoverished at a time like this? And I think too that it's important to speak about these particular areas. There are opportunities for us to speak about what are the good elements that are happening around the globe. So I want to send a, I keep coming back to this because I was really pleased to see that there was an opportunity for a variety. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, including our visionary sister Queen Angela, just being on a New York Times billboard. A lot of my friends, because the minute they saw on April 1st, I will be on the New York City Times Square billboard. My friends thought that it was an April Fool's joke. So I just want to know that some of them didn't even go and look. I had to like show them my little video because I missed all but 3 hours for because I was at work. And I just want to thank you and thank everyone that was able to celebrate. And it's interesting, almost all of us on this page smiled, or at least we just looked joyous. It was wonderful. So I want to say congratulations to everyone. And it's just a great opportunity to be able to see this vibration through the lens of the Poets Unite Anthology Volume 1. And I encourage persons to, it's available on Amazon. It is already a number one new release. It's a hot new release in terms of in poetry anthologies. And I think this is a great opportunity for each of us. I'm excited and I'm looking forward to sharing. Before we close out tonight, I'll definitely share one of my new pieces because this is getting me to the point where I'm writing more poetic verse. I tend to do a lot of prose and I like to do spoken word, but I'm finding that this is giving my keeping me grounded on the things that I like to express and the way that I like to express them as creatively as is possible. I also want to share with my listeners and those that are viewing that this is also a very engaging time. And when I say engaging, I mean it from a space of looking at, for example, things that are happening around the National Medical Association. And most persons, what is the NMA? But I'm like, they are always about service, excellence, and accountability. And they put out a press statement yesterday. So while most of us were looking at ourselves on Times Square, this was also going on. And I'd like to just share for those persons that are not aware that the National Medical Association, representing the collective voice of Black physicians and the patients we serve, expresses deep concern regarding the escalating health consequences of the ongoing Cuban blockade. This comes following a recent dialogue between NMA President Dr. Roger A. Mitchell Jr. and the Ambassador of Cuba, Tanieris Dieguez. Cuba's healthcare system is currently experiencing severe strain, driven by an intensifying energy crisis linked to restrictions on fuel access. Hospitals and clinics are facing persistent power outages, disrupting life saving services such as neonatal care, dialysis, chemotherapy, and surgical procedures. More than 96,000 patients are currently awaiting surgeries, including thousands of children, as the system is forced to delay care due to limited operational capacity. Fuel shortages are also impairing ambulance services, the transportation of healthcare workers, and the distribution of essential medicines. National pharmaceutical production has slowed significantly, and the stability required to store vaccines and critical medications is increasingly at risk due to ongoing electricity disruptions. The consequences are particularly alarming for vulnerable populations. Shortages of antibiotics, nutritional supplements, and basic medical supplies are contributing to worsening maternal and infant health outcomes, including tens of thousands of children experiencing delays in routine vaccinations due to logistical and energy constraints. From a medical and ethical standpoint, these conditions raise urgent concerns. Access to reliable electricity, essential medicines, and functioning healthcare infrastructure are foundational to modern medicine. When these are compromised, the result is preventable suffering, delayed care, and increased risk of morbidity and mortality. The NMA affirms that health is a human right. Public health systems must be protected from policies that unintentionally or disproportionately harm civilian populations, particularly children, pregnant women, the elderly, and those with chronic or life threatening conditions. As physicians committed to health equity and global health justice, we call for immediate removal of elements of the blockade that have led to the humanitarian and health impacts affecting the people of Cuba. We further encourage dialogue, transparency, and collaboration among the global medical and public health communities in response to the crisis to assist with access to care, medical supplies, and life sustaining resources needed post blockade. The National Medical Association stands in solidarity with healthcare professionals working under constrained conditions and reiterates its commitment to advocating for policies that protect patient care, preserve human dignity, and uphold the fundamental principles of public health. And that is the press statement dated April 1st, 2026, from the National Medical Association, entitled "The National Medical Association Raises Alarm on Public Health Crisis in Cuba." I want to thank my comrade and colleague, Obi Egbuna II, for sharing that particular link and information with us, because there's some colloquia that are in place, and I think it's important that people that are listening recognize that there's a lot that's going on, and it's just important that we are giving people grace, understanding, and authentic justice and inclusivity to the best of our ability to restore the harm done. Again, see how reparations keeps coming up and reparatory justice keeps coming up. So I just needed to make sure that those that are listening, I'm looking forward to having a guest join us on our next podcast of Oz Speaks Building a New Legacy here on Kings and Queens of the Airwaves in the near future. I know that our next regular broadcast will be 2 weeks from now, so that'll be the 16th of April, which is one of my favorite days because it's the day that our youngest daughter was born. And I don't know if I'll get her to join us, but maybe, just maybe, because she has a wonderful business, um, Beauty Mar. I just think, Beauty by Mary, I just think it's awesome. Beauty Bar by Mary. Make sure you say it right, Ma. Beauty Bar by Mary. And she is in Texas. You can pretty much, so she's on Instagram all the time. You know how the young people move. But she's doing really well as an esthetician and providing a variety of not just beautification services, but just making sure that you're well and that you're using the best products that are in harmony with your body system. So she's going to give me some infomercials to add for our next broadcast. But in the meantime, I'm encouraging persons, please be safe. Use this time as a time of reflection around the globe. We're hoping that there can be, wouldn't it be wonderful if during this time of all of these holy observances and hmm, celebrations for some that are very somber, those that are very spiritual, sacred, reflective, wouldn't it be fabulous if there was peace and tranquility, no genocide, no warfare, no rape and domestic violence, mm, no terrorism, at least for these next few days? It would be fabulous. And so we have to command that to the best of our ability. And I say that through the lens of knowing that there are mothers and fathers, grandmothers and grandfathers, families that are mourning acts of violence that have taken the lives of their relatives. And I speak to that from right here in St. Croix, Virgin Islands, where there's still feuds back and forth. And there are homicides happening on this small 84 square mile island as recent as earlier this week. So I keep encouraging persons wherever you rest your head, wherever you're giving your energy to, let us just expand that energy so it just restores another layer of peace to the best of our ability. I'm not trying to be fluffy, mushy. I'm just encouraging us to put the Creator by all the names that give veneration and worship. May we be granted peace. May we be granted with tranquility in abundance, along with prosperity in all ways. May the elements of air, fire, earth, water, and spirit surround us and keep us protected during this time where persons are observing this holy week and all the other different iterations that take place during this time. And mind you, while we're still being watchful of those that have no respect for life, have no sense of order, want to bring anarchy and chaos to humanity, and revel in destruction and demonism, we're putting that to that side. So sometimes people say that I should just do this and speak this way firm. So this was not I have some notes, but the intention was to share what's happening in the area, make sure that we highlight some of the work. It's one thing to make an announcement, a proclamation, and a resolution, but now the brass tacks of how do we repair, heal the damages done, and build up strong institutions that ensure never again, ever. I'm going to say that one more time. Never again, ever. Because now it's time for us to look at the future and bring a future that lets us thrive. So I'm going to pause there. And again, I look forward to you joining Speaks, Building a New Legacy, in 2 weeks here on the Crew podcast. And you can reach me at Aspeaks, ASTSPEAKS at gmail.com, or you can look for ChenziRa Kahina in virtually all social media, as well as Ast Speaks, ASTSPEAKS on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and I'm sure a few other platforms. I have young people starting to work on my media. So again, I thank you. And remember, culture heals humanity. Land is our foundation, and spiritual harmony unifies us. And I look forward to having you join us again for another versation in the very, very near future. We give thanks. Peace.